Hello, guys. Welcome to the show this afternoon. What I want to talk about is I want to talk about how this crisis is coming and when I think it's going to start, and why it's going to be a financial crisis and not just a recession. It's going to start as a recession. And the recession itself is going to be caused by a number of factors. Number one, factory manufacturing right now is dropping off in most countries. Not all countries. Some countries are actually doing okay. The United States is one of the countries that's doing okay, just okay, not great. But other places like China, huge drop-off of manufacturing. So we're going into a manufacturing recession right now. In fact, we're already in a manufacturing recession. But there's other sectors of the economy. There's the service industry and the service sector. Now, the service industry and the service sector right now at this point are still doing okay worldwide. So this slowdown is being led by the manufacturing sector. But that's a first indicator. Now, there's other huge indicators that we're entering into a recession right now. One of them is the fact that, well, first off, the fact that we've been like 11 years since the last recession. Recessions are timed. It follows it follows cycles within the markets. And what we've been through, and what caused the Great Recession of 2008, was a buildup in credit. Credit is debt, and the world is overburdened with debt right now. And this creates too much leverage in the system. The system right now at this point is completely over-leveraged. And what's happening is the liquidity that underbases the system acts as a support for the system. It's almost like the liquidity acts as lubrication for the system. And say you got a big machine and you got grease in all of the joints on the machine. The machine's working good, like say a backhoe or something, The machine's working good because it's got lots of grease. Well, that's your lubrication. That's your liquidity that's in the system, which is money that's in the system. Now, the Federal Reserve, has been raising interest rates. And also, they've been draining liquidity out of the system simultaneously. And they're still doing it. This is what's bringing this on. I can't be more clear about that. That what the Federal Reserve is doing is drawing the liquidity out that they added after the 2008 financial crisis. They're draining that liquidity out now. And it's like delubricating the machine or delubricating the system. And so what we got, seriously, is we got a worldwide slowdown. And this slowdown is only going to intensify over the next few months. First is starting in the manufacturing sector. Soon it's going to start after a few months from now, after 3 or 4 or 5 months. It's going to start to spread to the service industry and the service sector. Now, they're saying that we got like a year and a half before this recession hits. That's optimum. That would be, we might have a year and a half if we didn't have Italy. Quite seriously. If we didn't have Italy, and we didn't have Brexit, and if we didn't have Deutsche Bank, and if we didn't have this massive slowdown in China, and if we didn't have the real estate bubbles popping, pop, and believe me, the real estate bubbles are popping all over the place. Canada, right here where I'm at, is undergoing a real estate slowdown. We're going to call it a slowdown at first. But as the general world economy starts to slide toward this malaise, this slowdown, we're going to find that these popping real estate bubbles pop faster and faster. China's the worst real estate bubble of the bunch. The Chinese people, they can't move their money out of the country to make investments in other places so much. They have to, the Chinese government clamps down on them, and they have to be careful where they invest their money. And real estate is one of their favorite places to invest their money. Well, where did they get this money that they're investing in real estate? Well, if that's the question, I'll give you the answer. The answer is they got it from their being able to trade with all the countries on earth and being able to export goods from China. And they had tremendous manufacturing factories, and they were exporting goods all over the world and making a lot of money during the good years. All those years that the United States government was pumping quantitative easing money into the economy, Chinese goods were being sold all through North America. And not all of the goods that they manufacture are inferior. Some of their goods are pretty good quality. Chinese people are very smart, they're very industrious, they're hard workers, and my opinion of the Chinese people is very high. But you have to understand something, that China, amongst the highest authority in the Chinese government, they want to establish their destiny in the world. They want to make China the best country it can possibly be. Let's just put it that way, And so they have these grandiose plans. The One Belt, One Road initiative is a grand plan, And their plans for the South China Sea are grand plans. And they have been maintaining control over the entire Chinese area, the China landmass. They maintain control. And they maintain control over finance, over industry, over everything. The central authority of the Chinese government. And they have huge banks. Some of the biggest banks in the world, The Chinese economy is massive, but I don't believe that the Chinese economy will ever go into a financial crisis. And the reason why is because they have such control. But what they can't control is a general slowdown of the Chinese economy. And they're desperately trying to fight that right now, at this point in time in China, by switching from a society that produces products and exports them to the world to a society that's consumer-based themselves. And this transition they're trying desperately to make so that they can become the consumer. But it's not working quite so well. I heard today that the Chinese auto sales are way off, and real estate is not selling. They're putting the price of new homes in China at 10% off. Here, buy a new house, 10% off. Well, what's that going to do to the people who have already bought homes in China? Does this mean their homes are automatically worth 10% less? Most likely. But we got these real estate bubbles in Canada, in Australia, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, all over the place. We've got about a dozen real estate bubbles, and they're all beginning to burst simultaneously. And an awful lot of the money, the liquidity in the system, the wealth effect, if you've ever heard of the wealth effect. People say, well, I feel wealthy because my house is worth $1 million. So they use their house as an ATM machine. Basically, they set up mortgages on their home, and they borrow extensive amounts of money. Now, this is going on crazy here in Canada. It's gone to the point of being nuts here in Canada. houses in around places like Toronto, just north of Toronto. You can go and you can find whole subdivisions of homes, and each home is worth like $1.5 million, $2 million. And these homes are so overpriced, it's absolutely ridiculous. But you're going to find that if you went in each home, you'd find that the family inside the home has a mortgage and maybe a second mortgage, and you're using these mortgages for a line of credit from the bank. And they've lived the good life for the last 10 or 15 years, borrowing money on this line of credit, putting in swimming pools, buying expensive cars, and buying big Winnebagos and stuff like that. Well, the banks have made a lot of money here in Canada. And why? Is because when they lend out on these lines of credit, lend money out on these lines of credit, what happens is they've just created that money from nothing. And so when you see the bank saying, we made $10 billion this year in record profits, and if you think back over the last few years, a lot of these banks have reported they've made $5 billion, $10 billion a year in record profits. And of course, the bank managers and stuff and the people that work in the higher levels of these banks, they got big Christmas bonuses and everything else, and they've been living the high life. They've been living the high life on money creation, lending money out on the value of people's homes. Now, these banks rely on the fact that they're going to get that money back with interest. And this is what they have on their capital, on their books, so that when they come and they do a test of the banking system, say here in Canada, say they test the Royal Bank or whatever, one of these banks, right? And they do a bank test. They test them to see how much capital and security they have. They're counting all of this capital that they generated from loans that they've loaned out. This is a huge chunk of their capital. And so, yeah, they pass the test, But what happens if all of a sudden these people's houses' values dropped substantially to the point where these people actually walk away from their home and say, well, it's done, Well, the home goes back to the bank. But now at this point, there's a glut of homes that come back to the bank. The same thing happened in the United States during the financial crisis of 2008. You get all these homes coming back, and the price of the homes drops to nothing because there's tons of homes with nobody living in them. Just like China right now. 65 million homes with nobody living in them in China right now. This is a recipe for disaster. And so what we got, I told you guys I'm going to give you guys a timetable of this crisis. Basically, if they can keep, now listen to what I'm going to say right now, it's very important. If they can keep the stock market from rolling over, if the plunge protection team and if they can keep that stock market up, I mean, that's a big if. If they can keep that stock market from rolling over in the next 4 months, we got about 4 months until a number of situations in the world. Now you got to understand, first off, that we're already moving in this general direction toward a recession. The manufacturing sector's already in a recession. Germany's just about ready to call a recession. Canada's just about ready to call a recession. Italy's already in a recession. So recession is spreading. Now, if they can keep the stock market together for the next 4 months, during that 4-month period, what we're headed toward is, we're headed toward Italy, and we're also heading toward the United Kingdom, hitting sort of a wall in the European Union. Because this next financial crisis is going to be centered in the European Union, and there's a reason for that. And I'm going to give you what the reason is. It's the people that live in the European Union. There's a general dissatisfaction in the European Union with the European Union itself. amongst the people. And this is massive. This is massive. A massive dissatisfaction. But the people are staying in the European Union right now for the time being because this is what's basically taking care of them. It's taking care of them financially, and it's taking care of them through the process of the euro. But they're dissatisfied. Now, what do you think is going to happen if the European Union comes around and says, all of you people here in the European Union are now going to have to go into new austerity measures. We're going to cut back. We're going to cut all of you guys back so that you don't have enough money to feed your families. It's already they're dissatisfied. What do you think is going to happen then? Because Italy is running over budget, big time. France just gave 11 billion euros to try to settle the yellow vests down. Okay? And it somewhat worked. Somewhat. I say somewhat. But still, the dissatisfaction is widespread and rampant throughout Europe. It's this dissatisfaction of the people. When times start getting rough and we start to go into this recession in 3 or 4 months from now, that's going to blossom into a massive crisis. Massive crisis. And governments should be prepared to topple. Because when the people hit a certain point, and we can already see the seeds of it growing in Europe, then chaos and disorder will follow. And this creates, things can change under these sort of circumstances. Things can change so rapidly. So we got about 4 months until Italy is really in serious trouble. What else is happening about 4 months from now is the extension for Brexit. They got Brexit coming up on the 29th of this month. They're probably going to extend it for 3 months. So that means 4 months from now, they're going to be facing a hard Brexit again. Well, how good is it when that 3-month extension runs out? What chance do they have of getting another extension in past that? It doesn't seem to me like it's going to fly very good to get a second extension when they've already had one. So they're probably just going to end up extending the inevitable for an extra 3 months and then run right smack into the hard Brexit all over again. So we got Italy. It's going to be in serious trouble 4 months from now. And then we got probably a hard Brexit coming. On top of all the other financial woes, by that time, the numbers will be coming out of China. And they're going to be really bad, folks. Really bad. If they can hold the stock market from falling in the next 4 months, which in my mind, it's a very difficult thing to do. I don't know if they can do it. The stock market just might roll over before then. And so we're facing a situation now where a best case scenario is probably 4 to 6 months from now. We're going to be in a hard recession. And this hard recession is going to trip the switch on Europe. And the people of Europe are going to, if you think you saw something with this trouble that they had in France not long ago, you haven't seen nothing yet compared to what Europe is going to turn into at this point in time. So the real trouble is going to be centered in Europe with a fragmenting European Union. We have Italy that they need like $257 billion a year to run their budget, something in that order, and they owe like more than $1 trillion in debt. And the thing is the Italian banks are being kept alive only because Italy is able to sell their bonds still. If those bond yields in Italy start to go over 7%, Italy will not be able to finance its debt any longer. And this is what's coming, because investors are going to start to get nervous at a certain point about Italian debt. Now, France holds $260 billion worth of Italian debt. They've lent money to Italy that they don't even have. France, you already know what problems are in France right now. I only see this situation escalating. I see Europe basically probably within 6 months turning into a basket case. The European Union starting to fragment at the seams, and these problems that are there are now getting much worse. And this is what's going to make the European Union the center of the financial crisis. This is where the crisis is going to be centered, right in the European Union. And of course, European Union is big enough where it's going to be a worldwide financial crisis, but mostly centered in Europe. Now, the United States is going to act just like they always act to try to cure this financial crisis. And there's only one thing, one tool they have in their bag, it's money creation. And through this money creation, they are going to go into measures of stimulus like you've never seen before. Also, consider the fact that it's probably, in the election coming up in 2020, it's probably going to be on the Democratic side, Sanders running against Trump. Okay, this is probably what it's going to be. The Democratic nomination is probably going to go to Sanders this time. There is no Hillary to stand in this way this time. Hillary had her superdelegates last time around. This time, it's just Bernie all the way, and the people already love him. I mean, let's just face facts, folks. There's crowds. He had massive crowds when he even started his campaign here, and the people love him. Now, this crisis is going to occur in the next number of months, and of course, the politicians that are in office right now are going to take blame for it. This crisis is going to be very bad in the latter half of 2019. It's going to really be manifesting itself hard, and the United States is going to go into money creation like you've never seen before. And this is going to have an effect on the United States of much higher inflation. It's going to start eating away at people's bank accounts, and at a certain point in all of this, the people are going to start to lose confidence in the purchasing power of their dollars. What this is going to do is, this is going to act to stimulate the economy, because all that money on the sidelines, consumer spending is going to start to go up. See, we've seen malaise up till now in consumer spending. We've seen almost deflation. Not quite, but, at the same time, we've had consumer prices rising. Not rising sharply, but rising very slowly. At the same time, we've had a little bit of inflation. At the same time, at the core of the system, we've got deflation. And so we're kind of riding that line. You're going to see the deflation disappear at a certain point during this money creation. And they're going to have to go into this money creation in order to solve the crisis that's occurring in Europe and spreading to the world. It's going to take a lot of money. And that money, it's kind of like this. If there's no money in the system or no liquidity in the system, and the system's drying up for money, then people hold their money tight. They hold their money dear. They keep it in their bank account, and they stop spending. But when the opposite starts to happen, when money starts to flow through the system, and everybody starts spending, and consumer inflation starts to increase rapidly, and the velocity of money starts to increase rapidly, then people want to spend because everybody else is spending. And it creates a vicious cycle in the opposite direction from what we've seen. We haven't seen this for a long time, but prepare yourselves. It's coming. It's coming after this initial stages of this crisis trigger it. So in a times table, how much time do we have left? Well, if they can keep the stock market from rolling over, we probably got 4 to 6 months before this crisis really starts to manifest itself. And then once the crisis manifests itself, it's going to go through several stages. The first initial stage is not going to last very long. It's only going to last a period of weeks. And that's the deflationary stage of the crisis. Then followed by money creation stage, where the central banks try to cure the crisis by taking action. And then the next part of the crisis is when consumer inflation starts to come. Real, heavy, hard-hitting consumer inflation. That's the final stage. And that stage lasts quite a long time. That's the longest part of the crisis. But that is called a crack-up boom, is another name for it. It's hyperinflation. That's what its final stages of it is, hyperinflation. And it doesn't begin, initially it doesn't begin extremely quickly, but it slowly advances into it. You get a time period where you're able to acclimatize yourself to it, and so does all your friends and neighbors. But it only increases spending because everybody during that period wants to spend their money as soon as they get it, because they know that next week the prices are going to be higher. And it only goes faster and faster until finally it ends in a reset. That's how it ends. It ends in a reset. And in this case, there's going to be several asset classes that take advantage of this crisis, the final stages of this crisis, which is the crack-up boom. And those asset classes are anything that has no counterparty risk and is divested from the fiat currencies. In other words, it's a way out of it's a liquidity that's a way out of the fiat currencies. And I can name those three things for you. There's only three things: gold, silver, and cryptocurrency. And they're all going to take advantage. All three of those are going to take advantage of this crisis massively. And the people that invest, those things are not loved right now. They're all in a bear market right now. But for the smart people out there who invest in those things right now and hold them in a physical way so that they're not being held in somebody else's hands, they're being held by those people are going to benefit hugely from this crisis, because those three things are going to go up massively when confidence is lost in the fiat currencies. Because the dollar is a de facto currency of the world, and the dollar is going to be getting in trouble. And when it gets in trouble, all of the fiat currencies that are pegged to the dollar are all going to be in trouble too. It's going to be a loss of confidence in fiat currencies. So we go through ages on this planet. We went through the age of rulership by kings, dynasties. China had dynasties of kings. We went through the age of monarchies, and now we're going through the age of governments. Right? But we also, with money, we go through ages too. We went through the Middle Ages where gold and silver were the money in the form of coins. And later we went through the age of fiat currencies. And it was the money, dollars and like. Many different fiat currencies, but all paper money. We've went through that age now. And now we're moving into the age where money is going to have something hard behind it. Something solid behind it. We're moving into the digital age where money is going to be moved digitally across the internet, but it's going to be backed by something. Backed by gold and silver. It's going to be worth gold and silver. Thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next show. Bye-bye, guys.